I never thought something as ordinary as cleaning out a closet could completely change the way I see my family, but that is exactly what happened to me, and even now I still feel like I am trying to rebuild the version of my life I used to believe was real. It started on a completely normal Saturday, one of those days that don't carry any warning signs, where everything feels predictable and safe. I came home to help my mom sort through old belongings she had been avoiding for years. She kept saying she wanted to finally organize everything, but the way she said it felt more emotional than practical, like she was preparing herself for something she didn't want to face. The house was unusually quiet when I arrived. Not peaceful quiet, but heavy quiet, the kind that makes you notice small sounds like footsteps or the hum of the refrigerator. My sibling Ryan wasn't home, which made the whole atmosphere feel even more still, almost staged in a way I couldn't explain at the time. My mom was already in the hallway, pulling boxes out of the storage closet and lining them up against the wall. She greeted me with a smile that looked practiced, like she had already decided how she wanted the day to look. She told me we should start with the closet first because it contained things we had ignored for too long. I remember joking that every house has one place where time gets buried, and she gave a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. We started going through the boxes together. Old clothes, faded photographs, school papers, random objects that carried no immediate meaning anymore. At first it felt harmless, almost nostalgic. I even found myself smiling at small memories I had forgotten, holding things for a second longer than I needed to before placing them aside. But my mom wasn't relaxed. She kept rearranging things that were already sorted, touching objects without really looking at them, as if she was trying to stay busy for reasons that had nothing to do with cleaning. I noticed it, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Then everything changed. I reached behind a stack of old photo albums pushed deep into the back of the closet. My fingers brushed against something thin and slightly stiff. I pulled it out slowly, expecting it to be nothing important, maybe an old receipt or forgotten letter. It was an envelope. Old, slightly yellowed with age, carefully hidden in a way that made it feel intentional rather than accidental. It wasn't just stored there. It was placed there, as if someone had made a decision not to let it be found easily. I turned it over. And that's when I saw the words. Confidential, adoption records. For a moment, I didn't react. My brain didn't immediately process what I was reading. It felt disconnected from reality, like something that didn't belong in my life. Something that should have been locked away in a file cabinet somewhere far from a family home. I actually let out a small laugh because it felt so out of place that it didn't feel real. But when I looked up, I saw my mom's expression change instantly. Everything in her face went still. Not surprised. Not confused. Frozen. It was the kind of silence that arrives before truth has time to form words. Her reaction was immediate and sharp, like she had been caught off guard by something she hoped would never resurface. She stepped forward too quickly and reached for the envelope, her voice changing as she said it was nothing important, just old paperwork that should have been thrown away long ago. But I already knew that wasn't true. Because I know my mother. And I knew in that exact moment that what I had just found was not a mistake. It was something she had been trying to hide. And that realization changed the entire atmosphere in the room. The air felt heavier, almost thick, like the space itself understood that something irreversible had just shifted. I held on to the envelope without fully realizing I was gripping it too tightly, while my mom kept insisting I should just forget I ever saw it. But you cannot unsee something like that. It doesn't work that way. Once a single detail like that enters your mind, it doesn't leave. It starts to grow, connecting itself to every memory you thought you understood. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment over and over again in my head, the exact second my mom's expression changed, the exact way her voice shifted when she tried to dismiss it. It didn't feel like a misunderstanding. It felt like something carefully controlled that had briefly slipped out of place. The next morning, I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest, the kind you get when your mind has already started working without you. The house looked exactly the same, but nothing felt the same anymore. Even ordinary sounds felt louder, sharper, like reality had become more alert. My mom acted like nothing had happened. She made breakfast, moved around the kitchen, asked normal questions, but everything she did felt slightly forced. There was a distance in her behavior, like she was trying to rebuild normality over something that was already broken. Ryan still wasn't home, which made the silence even more noticeable. I kept thinking about them in a different way now, even though nothing about them had changed. That was the strangest part. Nothing external had shifted except my awareness, but it felt like everything had changed anyway. I found myself watching my mom more closely than usual, noticing details I had never paid attention to before. The way she avoided certain topics, the way she paused slightly too long before answering simple questions, the way she sometimes looked at the closet without realizing it. It all felt connected now, even if I didn't yet understand how. And I knew I couldn't just leave it there. Not after what I had seen. Because whatever was inside that envelope wasn't just old paperwork. It was a truth that had been hidden long enough to become dangerous. I couldn't stop thinking about the envelope. Even when I tried to distract myself with normal things, my mind kept circling back to that single moment in the closet, the exact second my mother's face changed, the way her body reacted before her words did. It wasn't just surprise. It was instinct. Like something buried for a long time had suddenly been exposed to air. That morning, the house felt different again. Not because anything had physically changed, but because I had changed. The same walls, the same sounds, the same routine movements from my mother in the kitchen, but everything now carried a second meaning underneath it. Ryan still wasn't home, and I found myself thinking about them more than usual. Not in a suspicious way at first, just a different awareness. Like I was suddenly noticing gaps in a story I had never questioned before. I went back to the closet when my mother stepped out to take a phone call. I told myself I was just putting things back in order, but that wasn't true. I already knew I was looking for answers. The closet felt colder this time, or maybe I was just more aware of it. I moved slower, carefully lifting boxes and shifting old items, checking places I hadn't looked before. Everything looked ordinary, but now, ordinary didn't feel safe anymore. That's when I found the folder. It wasn't hidden as carelessly as the envelope. It was placed deeper, under folded blankets and old seasonal clothes, like someone had intentionally layered it out of sight. My hands hesitated before touching it, like my body already understood what my mind hadn't accepted yet. When I opened it, I didn't understand the documents at first. There were forms, signatures, hospital records, legal stamps. Pages that felt too official to belong to something I was not supposed to know about. I turned them slowly, reading fragments, trying to make sense of them without fully realizing I was preparing myself for something irreversible. And then I saw the line. Adoption finalized. For a moment, everything went quiet inside my head. Not just the room, but my thoughts themselves. It was like my brain stopped processing and simply held the information without responding to it. I sat down on the floor without meaning to. My legs just gave out. The folder stayed open in front of me, as if it refused to let me misunderstand what I was seeing. When my mother came back, she knew immediately something was wrong. She didn't ask at first. She just saw my face, then saw the folder, and everything inside her expression collapsed into something heavier. There was no point in hiding anymore. I asked her directly, even though my voice didn't feel like my own. "What is this?" She didn't answer right away. She stood there for a long time, like she was trying to decide how much truth a single moment could carry without breaking everything. And then she said it. Ryan was adopted. Just like that. No build-up. No explanation that could soften it. Just a sentence that rewrote everything I thought I knew. At first, I didn't react the way I expected. There was no immediate shock or tears. Just a strange disconnect, like my emotions were delayed, waiting for permission to respond. Then it hit me. Not all at once, but in layers. Memories I had never questioned suddenly felt different. Moments I had taken for granted now looked like they belonged to a story I had only partially been told. Even my relationship with Ryan shifted in my mind, not because they had changed, but because my understanding of them had. My mother finally sat down. She started explaining, but her words came out fragmented. She said it had been complicated. That it was a situation involving instability before Ryan came into our lives. That there were legal processes, social services, decisions made quickly under pressure. But what she kept avoiding was the part one actually wanted to understand. Why it had been hidden. She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said something that made everything even heavier. Some things were never meant to be discussed. And that sentence told me more than everything else combined. Because it meant the silence wasn't accidental. It was intentional. A decision repeated over years until it became normal. That evening, I saw Ryan differently for the first time. Not because of who they were, but because of what I now knew and what they didn't. The distance wasn't physical. It was invisible, but real enough to feel like a wall forming between everything we had shared before and everything I now understood. And the worst part was that nothing had actually changed in the present. Only the truth had arrived. And once it did, it couldn't be ignored anymore. It just stayed there, quietly reshaping everything from the inside.